Hello, YouTube. I'm coming at you with something kind of unusual today. So, for the last year or so, I've had this newsletter called Desystemize, where I kind of focus on how we analyze data in terms of the forms we represent it in and what those representations do to the work of analyzing it. I also write on tis.so, the Inexact Sciences. I'm a contributing member to this group blog. So I've been kind of talking a lot with people about this sort of thing. And there was this discussion a couple of weeks ago. Started with David Chapman, who's trying to talk about the best way to understand a new field. How do you learn in a domain where you don't kind of come in with anything in the background? You kind of, from scratch, you got to learn something new, but you're not a child anymore, you're an adult. Like, how do adults learn that's different from just sitting down in school? Jake Orthwin mentioned that he, would be really interested in reading this backburnered project of Chapman's on a course of how to read a new field. So I thought, well, if Jake's waiting, why don't I try to put everything I can think of in one tweet? That was my goal for myself. I ended up with this tweet-sized course of basically starting, with field plus Reddit, find the relevant subreddits, learn the specific language that practitioners use, and then learn which distinctions drive those different uses in language, basically. So a sort of a distinction by distinction approach to learning a new field. And it occurred to me that this isn't really a common way people think about learning new fields. So it might just be worth recording myself doing it. And I put out a call, and my friend Keith mentioned that metropolitan traffic flow would be a good subject. And I really like that because, on the one hand, traffic flow is small. This isn't like Colin reads a new field, quantum mechanics, that's not going to fly in any sort of time scale. But at the same time, metropolitan traffic flow is there's clearly something there, right? Traffic really does happen or not happen. And it really is of material importance to millions of people's lives if we figure out how to make it happen less. So there is sort of a real objective field to be found here, but a very sort of approachable one. And so today what I'm doing is a Read a New Field course where I'm going to kind of try to dig into, traffic flow, traffic engineering in general, and see what I can get to. So before I get right into it, there's a couple of sort of big, I don't know if disclaimers is the right word, maybe some preamble about kind of what we're doing here. Because what we're not doing here is trying to pull like a Goodwill Hunting where I'm going to go and in a couple of hours I'm going to find the grand secret of traffic that all these traffic engineers couldn't figure out. Go right on the blackboard on the hallway, put all the cars sideways, and everybody's like, oh my God, this revolutionary thinker put the cars sideways. Right? When we say we're going to read a new field, what we mean is clarifying our language, right? Is it the case that there is one well-accepted theory for what creates traffic jams, or are there sort of different camps and different factions? What are the most interesting results that people feel the need to explain, right? Who are the thinkers? Where do they do their thinking? If you wanted to solve a traffic jam in your city right now, who would you talk to? What attributes of your city would you need to understand to prescribe the right thing? Who has the power to put in the fixes? These sorts of questions, right? And I'm not trying to go and become a master of traffic engineering and understand it all. What I need to know is how would I learn the specific sort of questions that are worth asking so that if I needed to go and do more, I would know my next step, right? When you say read a new field, you've succeeded at reading a new field when for any sort of question around traffic you can think of the next step. That's sort of a very rough and ready. And so what this means is that I don't really have sort of a guideline for when I will win reading a new field. I won't have just said, okay, traffic engineering is done. I've read it, right? The point is to kind of see if you come at this from a distinction and representational lens, can I get a sense of what the questions are faster than maybe a passive lens that says I have to find, the master class on traffic engineering. Somebody needs to explicitly put themselves in a teacher-student relationship with me, and I need to be a student explicitly and read what they've told me, right? What I'm trying to show is if you don't come into that sort of frame and you try to do it this way, can you sort of more efficiently get a sense of what's going on? And we're going to find out. And then at the end, I'm hoping to, as part of, my investigation of the field, learn maybe some sort of, subreddit or other community where I can show this video and say, hey, by the way, how did I do at reading the new field? Did I catch the biggest questions? Did I miss some of them? Is there a pattern to what I caught and what I missed? That sort of thing. It's not really a win-lose thing we're looking at here. It's sort of a knowledge logistics, what happens when you try to approach a new field in this way that's different from how most people approach new fields. That's basically my goal here. Another disclaimer is that my scanning speed is pretty quick. So obviously when I'm reading and I'm doing all my searches and I see something important, I'm going to point to it, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to say why it's not important. But probably something that's going to happen is I'm going to click on a new page, kind of scroll a bit, be like, that didn't seem right, and back out. And I won't really be able to explain that because the answer is basically just that I've read a lot of stuff over the years. I can sometimes just kind of look and get from the vibe that it's not going to be a good source and go backwards. And the other thing is I'm very willing to look stupid. And this is, I think, useful when you're learning a new field especially, because what that means is as I get to these intermediary things, I'm not going to trouble myself with, am I sure that it's true or false? I'm going to pick stuff that looks kind of true, assume that it's true, and see where it gets me. And if it's wrong, I'm just going to go backwards. So on the one hand, I'm very willing to be judged by this video, because if I tell you this representation distinction-based approach is a good way to read a new field, and then I get to the end of the video and I say a bunch of stupid shit that's wrong, maybe it wasn't a good way to read a new field, right? I'm making something of an objective claim here when I say that this is going to work. But what you can't do is take a claim that I said in the middle of the video and highlight it and be like, wow, that was a stupid thing to say, if I've already kind of abandoned it by the end. Because a very bad way to learn is to take every single new fact you see and be like, this could be true, or it could not be true, it's impossible to say. And slowly grind out, let's look at the credentials for this guy in this study, and then maybe, after 2 hours of laborious research, we can include that traffic is made out of cars. You know what I mean? It's so much better to just sort of constantly experiment with a new representation that looks like it could be right, and just see how it feels, see where it gets you, see what sort of things are easy and hard to say. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video. So feel free, put me on blast if I end up being kind of silly at the end. But don't take a quote from the middle out of context and sort of act like the fact that I said something wrong about traffic engineering 30 minutes in means that this is a bad way to learn, because it's a bad way to look smart the entire time that you're doing it. Which is exactly why I think you shouldn't prioritize trying to look smart while you're trying to get smart. I think they're sort of in opposition. And I think that with new facts, you have to be sort of very willing to instantly commit, in the sense that I'm willing to pretend this is true and see where it gets me, while still uncoupling that from how quickly you'll abandon the new fact, right? You should be very quick to believe and very quick to disbelieve at the same time. As an aside, this isn't exactly relevant to reading a new field, but it's interesting and it partially explains how I got this skill. If you play a lot of social deduction games like I used to, Mafia, Werewolf, stuff like that, that's also how to be a very good townsperson. Because here's a very bad way to be a townsperson, is to sit down in the first day and be like, well, you could be the Mafia, or you could not be the Mafia. It's impossible to say. Right? Because then everybody just says that, and you sit around in a circle looking at each other, nothing gets done, and then eventually you just have to pick somebody, but the informed minority can collaborate on who they're picking, and the townspeople are picking at random. No. What the townspeople need to do is instantly, on the smallest, stupidest thing they see, say, what would it mean if this for sure pointed to the Mafia? Who would the buddies be in that scenario? Who would be confirmed in that scenario? Go, go, go. And then as soon as something else that's a little more real, but still pretty arbitrary, but a little like, oh, that guy breathed weird. Never mind the stuff I was saying. What would it mean if this guy breathing weird meant he was the Mafia? Because then at least you have a chance of catching the Mafia, and at least if the Mafia know you got him, they're going to be nervous, that maybe you really do believe that heart in the breath thing. And if you're wrong, then the mafia are maybe really eager to pounce on it. And then that's something real that happens a lot, is mafia trying to pounce on bad cases. And you can look everyone joining and saying, are they doing the thing that I'm doing? Or do I think that they're mafia and they're trying to use it? Because that would mean that guy with the weird breathing is actually a townsperson, right? So that uncoupling of how strongly you'll believe something versus how quickly you'll abandon it, I think is really important and a big part of what I'm trying to show here. So that's kind of the biggest takeaway about watching a video about reading a new field is I'm going to kind of flow. We're going to see what happens. I'm certainly not going to vouch that every little thing I say in the middle of this is going to be right. Final disclaimer. Obviously, the best for this kind of video is the field I know a little about as possible. And I don't really know much about traffic flow. The one thing that I do know is complexity science, which is the study of autonomous subunits that are agentially trying to pursue their own goal. So the idea would be that instead of modeling all of the cars, sort of like maybe through fluid dynamics, which I know some people do, you would go and model each car as an agent trying to do something and see what happens when you get a bunch of them acting together. And I do have a fair bit of background with agent-based modeling and complexity science, so to the extent that that ends up being used in an explanation of traffic, I will kind of be able to click with that maybe faster than someone who's tabula rasa, but hopefully it'll still be new enough to get going. So with that, I have no set time for how long I'm going to do this. We're just going to kind of see what happens. Now, in my tweet-sized course, I said to go right away to searching the field plus Reddit. Actually, you should start, and I'm going to clear up some tabs here. You should start by just searching the general, so if I just search what causes traffic jams, let's say in cities. So this is the kind of thing that if you go like, what really causes traffic? These are not going to be good sources for what you want to learn. But it's very useful to learn what the sort of dominant frame is for the person who just goes in. So don't spend a lot of time on just doing the trivially naive, I'm just clicking the search. But let's go. Let's see what Wikipedia has to say. This is 2004. I don't care. Why does traffic happen? The weird, surprising, and more common. Let's see these. What really causes traffic congestion? So this is what coming out of scanning, you can kind of see like, sure, there's a lot of car on the roads. Now, I'm not saying bikes aren't exercising. You know, this is the kind of thing you can tell, all right, this isn't like a very scholarly, we don't need this. We don't need this. Let's see. Okay, so here's an example. This is traffic jam, or informally a traffic snarl up. So jams are when vehicles are fully stopped for periods of time, and otherwise you would just call it congestion. And these guys say that you do it as a flow analogously to fluid dynamics. Now, is this the right frame, or should you do an agential frame? I don't know. I don't necessarily trust Wikipedia to have the right answer, but it's good to know that fluid dynamics for traffic is at least enough accepted that you can put it on Wikipedia, and none of the Wikipedia guys take it off. Let's just go right to causes then, sure. Oh, wow, it's because people work and live in different spots, or they need to get goods and services. Who had to put this, man? Like, hey, sometimes the reason there's a car is because a guy needed to get a thing in their car. Holy shit. All right, so some traffic engineers try to use fluid dynamics by butterfly events, such as the abrupt spearing maneuver. Unlike a fluid, it's often affected by signals. Okay, so there's like alternate theories. So this is a good way to learn. Like, let's see what Boris Kainer's 3, and let's see what this traffic is. Oh, haha, poor correlation of theoretical models. So let's read this. But when they literally put on Wikipedia, by the way, this shit don't work at all. We just like to say it. We just love math. So, I'll put it this way. There is a lot of math that doesn't work, that doesn't have Wikipedia saying, by the way, this shit don't work. So when Wikipedia's telling you you fucked up, boy, you fucked up. So, empirical models. Okay, MIT mathematicians have phantom jams, where small disturbances cause a full-blown self-sustaining captain. The mathematics of such jams, which the researchers called jammetons. Does anybody else call it jammetons? Sorry. Does anybody else call it jammetons? R.A. Ramadan, are you also the guy who made this page? Am I going to see you? Okay, at least 2 people call it jammetons. I'm willing to accept. I'll keep this open. I'll go read this after. There may be a fundamental law of road congestion. I mean, I can believe that building new roads results in additional traffic. But there's this bit from Zeynep Tufekci who makes this point, and this is about seatbelt safety, right? How safe are seatbelts? And some people will say, well, a seatbelt doesn't really, because then everybody will just go faster and spend all that safety budget on going faster. And like, yeah, sometimes you get some second order effects that partially dampen. But when you actually look at the studies, it's really clear that there's a little bit of second order, but it still is way safer to wear a seatbelt because that stops you from going through the goddamn windshield. And that's a good thing to stop from happening. So it's one of those, anytime you read something like this, that's saying like there's a second order effect, and maybe it is completely like, I think it's also very possible that there's some more traffic that gets added with wider roads, but also there's more space for the cars to go, so that also lowers it. Now, I have seen that picture of the highway that's like the fucking 20-lane highway or whatever, and that still gets jammed. So maybe this is actually true, right? I don't know. But people can get very glib about second-order stuff eating first orders. So I don't need to know why a traffic jam is bad. Traffic management. This implies that somebody knows what they're doing. Oh, this is just like... Somebody put automated highway save, just like, what if cars were all talking, you know? I am not a self-driving car guy. I'm not going to even open that up. Okay. So the three-phase theory by Boris Kaner. So there's so much. I'm going to go, when I see this much fucking... This guy clearly loves all the fucking symbols. Let's just go to 14 first. This is one that scares me. Criticism of the theory. Thanks, Wikipedia. If I'm on the Buns Autobahn 5 in German. Oh man, I'm gonna close this tab, everybody. We're gonna... Oh, man. And this is the same guy, so we're going to close this, too. Let's... Maybe the Jamatinos guy is... Wait. So it's Jamatons and Jamatinos? For fuck's sake, man. Come on. Alright. So he's saying they can serve as an explanation. We consider 2 equation models... It's not modeled as individual vehicles. It's continuous functions. So it's not agential. This is another pure fluid dynamics guy. 2 equations are linearly unstable. Yeah. Yeah, and this is, you know, clearly phantom traffic jams need to be explained, because anyone who's like looked out the window at a car while they're in a different car will see that sometimes this kind of thing just happens, right? Obviously, phantom traffic jams occur. So one of the things we need is a theory of why. So it's good that they're saying it. They're saying instabilities in flow and the onset of the jams have been studied in continuum models. There's 2 competing effects. Preventative driving. So Jamatins are the traveling traffic waves. The sharp shocks must always face towards incoming vehicles, and they always travel slower than the vehicles, so they run into a sharp and sudden increase in density, which forces them to brake suddenly. Okay. They're stable. They can only vanish by smoothing or lowering of density. And what's a Giammattino? So the Jammatons, they're saying a traffic jam is a chain, not just the one wave is not. A Jammaton wave to MIT is like scary because it might create a bunch more and create this dense pinch point where people are doing more braking and accelerating and higher risk of accidents. So this, you don't know if it's right or wrong. You give them some minus points because when they say we're going to make up our new word and the thing that it does is create our other new word. That's always a little, that was the same suspicious in the Wasname guy. I think that was a couple of, the Kerner theory. That made me want to skip right to criticisms. But I do really like that they're pointing out, these are the phenomena that I do need to explain. And these MIT guys do seem, like they are trying to explain real things. So I'm at least in far enough to go watch these videos. So let's go watch these videos and see what's up. So a circular road is particularly friendly because the vehicles are exactly conserved. If it's not too long, they will form one. What is Inviscid Equation? Oh, inviscid as in non-viscous. Okay. So they mentioned this at the start where they were saying that obviously there is viscosity. Traffic doesn't flow perfectly smoothly because it's people, but they're saying if you model it inviscidly, it's good enough. I have to... When it says download, is it going to actually play? Or am I going to have to... Oh, that's the still. Oh, man. I don't want to try to figure out how to make this work on the stream. Oh my god, they actually did an experiment. Wow. Was it in a single road on Berlin? Ooh. A long straight road in Cairo. Strong similarities. There's too many Okay, so this is where... Now this is where the sort of starts playing in your head. Where they're saying like, wow, we can definitely see part of what we predict. However, the world is complicated, and then that part doesn't square with my theory. Because the complicated part is what you're trying to explain, right? So that, oh, it's dead. I wonder if I go archive. Now, because it's a media file, I guess that it might not work. Oh, that was a tweet from Dan Liu. That's different. Being. No, what about archive.org? Though I guess, is there even going to be like the media here, even if the snapshot is here? Okay, it was saved. 21. I don't know. Let's see if it's there. Huh. This looks like a really good resource. I'm quite bummed this is just dead now. And it dead recently. This was in 21 October and it was still here. I'm pro ant. I bet ants can solve traffic jams. Social insects rule. Which one of these is the Cairo? Was that any of these? So this is a really strong credibility symbol that these guys are also talking about synchronized clapping, the Mexican wave, like this is a very strong sign that these guys are actually interested. This isn't somebody who's going to just sit and look at a road and I'm so sorry to this guy, but that was such a perfect example of what not to do, that you are going to be my torque off point for the rest of this video to explain someone being naively numeric. I apologize. But you know what I mean? This is somebody who really cares about this general idea of emergent phenomena, right? And so, simulations of waves, multi-line traffic, stuff like that. Wait, didn't I? Okay, so is this just not gonna... Okay. This is just gonna be stuck because it's in the Wayback Machine. So I'm really liking this MIT thing so far. Multi-valued Jamison is a straight line segment. One thing you'll notice is that I'm really sort of phoning it in. I don't need to understand the exact mechanics of the Jamison. Like this saddle graph, what matters is that I know if I get through a couple hours and decide that Jamisons explain literally fucking everything, then I can go back and say, what data points did I need to calculate the Jamison? I don't need that now reading the new field. What I need to know is, okay, there is a Jamison. People have literally gotten cars in the real-ass world and put them on a circular track to see if they could find it. And they kind of found something that was kind of like a Jamison. And they've looked at real videos of long roads in Cairo and kind of found some of the Jamison stuff, but haven't found some of the other Jamison stuff. And the idea, it sounds kind of arrogant to say, like, well, don't I need to understand Jamisons to know if they're true? And the answer is, really, it would maybe help, but I'm on a time budget. I don't need to understand all this shit to figure it out. I just need to have a sense of where this sits in relation to the rest of the field, right? So, and this is on real sensor measurement data on I-35W. I have been stuck in traffic there many a time. So a strong qualitative agreement. I see the agreement, so that's saying no. I literally don't even understand this graph. Maybe I'll come back to it. I'll leave this tab open in case I feel like understanding this graph, but I'm not going to try to right now. I want to get to this conclusion. So they're saying phantom traffic jams can happen when all drivers behave by the exact same laws. Denser traffic travels slower and it takes a certain adjustment time. So in defensive driving, counteracts it mildly, but then when it happens, it kind of goes over. Real traffic possesses Jamisons. How do we avoid it? Depends on the model parameters. I wonder if there's a model to play with. It's very, very popular. So this is where it gets a little scary. That these guys were sure popular in 2009. Nobody's coming a decade on, it looks like, and coming with some more stuff about Jamisons. Actually, what I'm going to do. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to search Jamison. However, it's been so long since I've done a... There we go. Who's talked about a Jamison this year? They've talked about Hamilton. Okay, somebody is still working on it. And then this looks like PopSci, but I am curious if this pop... Like, you know what I mean? Like, why are they talking about it now? And are these the same? It's Benjamin Siebold, Morris Flynn, Aslan Kazanov. Are these the same? Yeah. Same guys. So they're still working. Oh no, this is from 2012. No, I want to know if people are like still doing... Oh, there's so many ads here. Okay, so this is clearly... Yeah. This is just somebody else read this and made this as a content mill thing, which is not judgment towards John Stoughton. You gotta make that money. But this isn't like a credibility boost that Jamatins are still. This is rephrasing. But this one was from when? This is a 21 article. It's still Freyson, right? He was one of our guys, right? Or was Freyson the Germany guy? Wait, wasn't Freyson? I don't remember. No, it was Boris Kanger. Okay. I feel like I recognize Freyson from something I just read, but I don't remember how. But this is interesting because it's new. Let's quick catch up on these and then circle back to this. But also I'm going to pause the video and use the bathroom. All right. We're back. Why does traffic sometimes happen for no reason? Why indeed? Sign up. Okay. Okay, so this guy says or Jamatons. Yeah, so this is just more content mill stuff. Sure. This is more content mill stuff. This is more content mill stuff. Okay, let's take a look at this guy, and then we're gonna go. I know I mentioned in my thing that I start with Reddit. Let's go get into the traffic engineering Reddit stuff in a bit, but like I said, I really like these guys who are approaching it from as a general case of collective motion behaviors, because that suggests that they're looking to explain the right parts. I really like that. It's one of those, and this is actually interesting because oftentimes the idea that you're looking for a unified theory of everything is like a weakness, right? Like that, it makes you think less of the person who's writing about that. Case of a pattern, that's not necessarily the same. Like, you can imagine saying, like, oh my god, let's say maybe it's Martin Freyson never shuts up about collective motion behaviors. And maybe that's true, but when you look at that page, that archive page we had of, like, I'm looking at the wave starting in a crowd, and I'm looking at what ants do, and I'm listening to clapping start getting synchronized, then it's clear that what they will consider as an explanation of the phenomenon, they're not going to be satisfied with something that's particular to this one road in Berlin. And actually, I think it was just Germany. I don't know if it was Berlin. But you see what I'm saying, right? That even if somebody's coming from a broad field and they think that explains everything and they're looking at the little stuff, that's not necessarily that bad, because what it means is they want explanations that rhyme with the brighter phenomena, which means explanations that are more general. So it's kind of a weird thing to think about, that specificity of field, if it's a broad enough field with enough subcases, can still actually mean a propensity for general explanations, which is why I find it more credible that they're starting by saying, I'm a collective motion expert. Because what you can't do is start by saying, I'm a collective motion expert. When you write this kind of sentence, these sentence pairs, this is them trying to say, hey, I'm a collective motion specialist, but you're going to get offended if I just say it like that, and you're going to get insecure and be like, well, but you can't get your PhD in collective motion, so actually, that's what's happening here. So I'm interested in this, and I'm going to take a bit more of a look. So let's see. They're saying, this is boring, though. The spontaneous formation of stop-and-goers requires inertial second-order frameworks. What's just the main point? I don't want to get into all this, man. Just give me the point. What's the point? I'm not gonna read this shit. I will believe you if you say something mathy. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the top panels are the real experimental data, and the bottom panels are the simulation of the calibrated model. Okay. I mean, I like this. This looks good. All right, so the good news is there's somebody doing work within the last year who used Jammeton somewhere. It wouldn't have shown up, but where did they use it? Jammeton. Oh, just in the... Okay, so maybe this guy isn't a Jammeton guy because it was actually just in the... Okay, yeah, they don't really care about the word Jammeton. They're just saying that's something in the... They just want to call it a phantom wave. That's almost more credible, actually. So maybe not that Jammetons exactly as the MIT mathematics would call them, but like, this is a theory of phantom waves. Phantom waves seem to hold up. Unfortunately, I don't know if I could go into this without... And this is the kind of thing that's like, you get into this when you're damn sure that knowing all this shit is going to give you answers that not knowing this shit doesn't. You don't just like... Maybe some people do. I would not just go in and try to internalize all these goddamn theorems just for shits. That doesn't seem like the way to go. But let's start actually doing, what are we, 36 minutes in? Maybe I'll start actually doing what I said in my TweetSide course is how you should start. So if I just go traffic engineering let. Is there not? There's civil engineering. And there is... What on earth? Okay. So at least 3 years ago, it was a hot job market. They do a lot of CAD work. They do Excel work. This is exactly what I'm talking about, where it doesn't look like... It looks like all the traffic stuff is like a sub-branch of civil, which is a little sad. There isn't a traffic-specific subreddit, probably. I mean, I'll crack a couple other keywords and find out. But like this sort of thing, there is so much information in a sentence like this. I'm going to read this verbatim. Day-to-day includes creating graphics in GIS, report writing, CAD work in MicroStation, traffic volume analysis in Excel, and running models in various simulation software. That gives you so much insight as to what is actually happening. And that is something that will sit in my brain as I go read a lot of it. That, okay, these guys do a lot of stuff in GIS, and MicroStation, and Excel. They could have also said my day-to-day is a lot of time sitting on the side of the street with a clicker and clicking it each time a car goes by. And they didn't say that, right? And that's interesting. Yeah. Back here. Oh, let's quick look at this. There's traffic engineering has simulation and modeling, so there's design construction, ITS, project management. What does ITS mean in this context? Intelligent transport system. I'm going to read this in a second here, but let's see if there's anything else here. All right, what's an intelligent transport system? So it's where information communication is applied to road transport. So that's just like anything like Waze or whatever, right? That's just telling you. This is so, I mean, the same thing counting the red light camera and the vehicle. Like, this is just a meaning. This is way too broad of a category. This is just how to do computers at roads. That's not helpful. Okay. Let me just read all these, and I'm going to try like traffic jam write it. It's probably going to be people complaining about traffic jams, but you never know. Microsoft Office for report writing, you poor bastard. MicroStation. I wonder, there's been a lot of MicroStation. It's just a CAD software for tuning. Okay. I hate dealing with complainers. Nothing is ever good enough for them. Buddy, that's reporting. Bum, bum, ba, bum. Oh. The best design engineers have O&M experience and know when to hammer a contractor on construction or know when a specific piece of infrastructure will be a bear to maintain. MSC, walls, anyone, or about fancy trail networks or bike lanes, shudder. I am a cyclist. I like fancy trail networks and bike lanes. Good to know that real engineers don't like them. I want to know what an MSC wall is. I'm just curious now. Okay, it's those guys. I know those guys. Those would be a bad. Those would suck to maintain. Because this is all like, hey man, you know where I want to be is on the ground. And then you're like, no, you got to be behind the wall. And then it mudslides because it's mad at you. Okay. I didn't Google O&M because I figured it was just operations and management. It's operations and maintenance, which if you're maintaining it, you're kind of imagining it. So I guess technically I was arrogant in not Googling that particular acronym, but also I got it wrong, but I also got it right. So 80 Office 20 Field. All right, well, that's a little more than that other guy made it sound. At least Crenenden did it 20%. Crenenden seems this is the most expert so far, and this is actually a really important sort of case study. Let's get into this a bit. So one thing you might think about, there's a sort of rationalist idea that it's all about the ideas. And what that would mean is when reading a new field, everyone would sort of be equally credible because everybody's got their own ideas of what is right or wrong, and you read them and you don't know what's right or wrong until you like get a majority, not a majority, like a big enough sample size or whatever, and you start investigating. That is not true. That is so not true, it's ridiculous. And it shouldn't even be controversial, because we all know a crank when we see them, but then we have to like go and retrodict how that's about their beliefs and not the form. But of course, form is a huge hint of competence, right? And this is not at all in contradiction to my earlier thing, where I'm willing to look stupid to become smarter. That is one completely distinct concept, which is, more or less, when you're trying to improve your representations, if you don't put in a bunch of work to kind of always look smart at each stage of the chain, then you can just grow the chain faster, because you're not doing as much work on appearance work, optocratic work. That's one idea. Separately from that, when you just hear somebody talk, the ways in which you have a mature representation looks very different from an immature representation. And what makes a representation mature is only partially dependent on what it's about, right? Maybe the best analogy here is if I see a new kind of tree that I've never seen before, right? It could be that this is a tree that grows really fast and that it's kind of young even though it's tall. Or it could be a tree that doesn't grow so fast and it's quite old even though it's small. Sure. But a tree that is at least so high is at least so old. And similarly, a representation that is at least so nuanced and distinctive is at least so mature. So let's go into this from Crenenden, right? So what Crenenden is saying, so first off, they, That's nothing new for any industry. Crenendon feels comfortable relating their industry to a wide variety of other industries because of their lived experience. The best design engineers, Crenendon's met a lot of design engineers, some better than others. The best ones have real experience looking at the real thing. This is true everywhere. And know when to hammer a contractor on construction. This is true everywhere. Or know when a specific piece of infrastructure will be a bear to maintain. And then they just listed 3 things that have been a pain in the ass for them before. Which means they've been working long enough that somebody's been around to be a pain in their ass at least 3 times. And then he says, I don't actually know if it's a he. The K, the hard K, is kind of like a masculine sound. Let's see if there's... Do we get a pronoun? I was always going to go to Crenendon's pay next and creep on him. Okay, we'll use they, because it doesn't say. Use they when it don't say. So, they say, I'm more in the civil realm than the transport, but actually, this is straight up just, once you become mature, then this preoccupation with form, maybe if you're like a snot-nosed, 22 years old, I just graduated, I'm a civil engineer. I have a civil specification. Fucking Crenendon just, I look at cars, man. It's all fucking... You know what I mean? That as you get more mature, the distinctions break down because what just matters is getting it done. Every now and again, I even beat them at their own game when it comes to analyzing new designs from the planners. This is a very mature boast, right? This is just saying, listen, once you get good enough, you shouldn't be compartmentalizing yourself like this. You should just understand the broader patterns. Okay? My job is not just reliable engineering. The key is understanding how much reliability the public is willing to pay for and codifying that in the maintenance plans. In other words, Crenendon has... What am I trying to say here? Ultimately, when stuff gets done, it's not true that everything is a compromise and that everything is sort of efficiently on a scale that you're trading off one thing or the other. And in fact, this sort of efficient, not even market hypothesis, like this efficient domain hypothesis is a very fallacious thing that a lot of people will do thinking that it's rational. What is true, though, that the decisions you're being asked to make usually are, because if we understood just a strictly superior thing, we would just do it. So on the one hand, I believe that there are many times you can just escape your strictly, your frame of do this trade-off one or the other and just try to find something that's better in every way. But your job is going to mostly be trade-offs because those are the decisions that somebody needs to make, right? Like, part of it is just Crenendon, use real-world experience, make sure that the MSC wall don't fall down. But also, like, this is the sort of, like, this is... I'm struggling to articulate this point. This is a very, very clear marker of experience, these sentences. And I don't need to know anything about traffic engineering to say that. And they're saying now you have to calculate total cost prior to getting design approval. Traffic engineering doesn't do a lot of the technical work themselves. It's usually subject to the whims of development cycles. They do neighborhood traffic analysis and stuff rather than geometry design. I say that EAM is the future because no one is doing it on a civil scale besides many of the Aussies and the Kiwis. It also involves a lot of soft skills. Now, what is EAM in this context? Did I already look that up? Is that up here? Enterprise asset management? Oh, okay, because I started up here. Yeah. This is the same guy as the complainer guy. I love it. Okay, let me start from the actual top then. I missed that this was all one thread. Yeah. Enterprise infrastructure asset management. Okay. Yeah. So we go back here. A lot of soft skills. It's not well understood. We'll talk about traffic flow as a level of service, which is part of the right answer, just not the whole right answer. Again, this sentence, if you take this and replace it with whatever you want, this is almost always a correct sentence, right? And being somebody who will say this is such a huge marker of experience, even when I don't actually know how true it is for traffic flow. Because most things, thinking about them in one way is part of the right answer, but not the whole right answer. That just tends to be how answers about real things work, right? I'm going to talk about drainage and runoff quality, air quality. So it needs to deliver. Okay. We're blazing new trail every day. Yeah. Okay. So this is a great example of what I was talking about, which is that you can determine credibility on form and then use that to sort of slingshot yourself into content. Because now, when I'm talking about what are the big things in traffic engineering, I have a very nice proxy. What does Credendon think? Because once I've established that this is somebody who I would view as very credible, I'm just going to go creep on what they say. And hopefully it's mostly about traffic engineering, because if they were just like, well, I'm a traffic engineering who's also into inflation porn, then we're going to have a very interesting time. But this seems like landfills aren't getting mined anytime soon. Okay, that's not traffic engineering, but that's interesting. Okay, so they're also a credible fruit person. Christmas trees. This is just the variety hour. Even if I don't get traffic stuff, hey, you're somebody I trust. Tell me some new stuff. Christmas trees are mostly farmed. Softwood lumber tariffs are based on the idea that our stumpage fees are lower than our private forest rates. Almost all of Canada is crown land that's never been sold because it's so remote. I won't get into the politics of crown land sales. Could you, though? I would actually be very happy if you got into it. Oh, our surveying. Ooh, let's give that a try. I want that in the back though, because I want to kind of finish this thread. We'll go through all the traffic engineering stuff. We'll try a couple other Reddit keywords. We'll go for the surveyors. Maybe we'll do surveyors after we go through these, actually. This person doesn't want their child to contract COVID-19. It's also a sign of expertise. It's bad to get the disease. You don't want it. I worked at a hospital. It's bad. All right. Now it's kind of clumping up. All right. So there maybe isn't much more to creep on, but I'm really glad we got this kind of thing, because this really goes to show a lot of what I'm talking about when I talk about these representational frames. That sort of, there is a grammar to how knowledge is gathered, to how it flows, to how it stacks on itself, that a lot of that grammar is consistent for any field that touches the real world, because the real world is patterned in consistent ways. And so you can use this to sort of get a really good sense of where the field is, because I'm gonna believe this. Let's see if we're gonna get anything else. Didn't I read this one already? Okay. There are planners who do the high-level things you're thinking of, and there's designers who delve into the nitty-gritty. That's good to know. Traffic planners, traffic designers. Mean Machine 10. Wait. Is this somebody I know? This might be somebody I know. No, I know Dream Machine, not Mean Machine. Too many machines. If it's a big bridge project, the PM should be a structures person. Okay. Not a big hit. Oh, collections. Oh, that's kind of cute. They do collections of All right, I like this. I like this. Let's go. Let's just give this a whole... You're getting to work at 7:30, you poor bastard. I love to sleep in, man. Check the video wall. Wait, what? Oh, so it's like they've just... You know what's funny? Is that if I had to imagine, like, what a Hollywood guy would do, is like, well, the traffic guys, they just got this big wall. This just got all the cameras, and they just look, and they'll just tell you if there's a crash. Apparently, there's a big wall. I love it. There's just a big wall with all the fucking cameras. It's just like, how's traffic doing? I like that, actually. It seems like the kind of thing that feels like a lazy Hollywood way to do it. But no, I guess that's how they do it. Awesome. Okay, so this is the guy who like gets the citizen concerned to review and follow up on. That's a high credibility signal. That's a lot of goddamn meetings. So this is interesting. So there was a traffic signal project. They check things out. The contractor's equipment isn't working properly. That's how contractors work. They make some adjustment to the signal timings and verify that the changings help improve things a little. So I would have guessed, especially thinking about all this phantom wave stuff from earlier, about how it's propagating and propagating, I'm really curious what kind of verification you can do where you show up at 1 p.m., you find out what the problem is, you make the adjustments, and then in the rest of what's left of 1 p.m., you can validate that they got fixed. That surprises me. That apparently you can verify your traffic fixes very quickly. I don't know how I feel about that. That feels surprising. I'm just going to record that one down and go to it later. Okay, they just look at the traffic. Thank God somebody's just driving around and looking at stuff. TMC, is that like the traffic management center? And is that what has the video wall? Haha, it was. Traffic Management Center. It's a building with people watching roadway cam. I missed this reading it the first time, but I was right. A new piece of traffic signal equipment that was delivered to the mailroom and left in the testing lab. Hopefully I can take her. I love this. This guy's got a Hollywood-ass sounding like, boss, we got some new traffic technology for you. Well, maybe if I got the time I can tinker. I love that. Who are you? Off ramp to nowhere. Godspeed. Okay. I don't know how much it helped me learn traffic. I'm very happy that I read this, though. It entertained me immensely. Creativity in traffic engineering. Bollards. The city didn't go for my pothole sticker idea, and I don't blame them. It was kind of dumb. I was reading that like, that seems kind of dumb, but I don't want to come into their place and be like, I'm the new reading the new field guy, but isn't that kind of dumb? It is dumb. Oh, but that makes sense for the why. It's because there were potholes for a couple of days, and the residents were asking that you shouldn't be filled in because they were slowing the traffic. Okay. You described traffic engineering, which is different than transportation engineering. Traffic is about planning, whereas transportation is about physical geometry. Okay. And I was going to say that seemed a little strict, and sure enough, here, ATX Girl says, I disagree with this comment. I work in traffic engineering. We do a lot of design and work with physical geometry. The original comment maybe is traffic engineering, but also transportation planning. Okay. Transportation engineering is the broad discipline. Traffic engineers work design aspect. Anything else cool here? Okay, this is another one that might be worth some. All these jobs are so there's traffic engineers, traffic planning engineers, do high level, civil roadway, civil design, actually do the CAD design. They design and draft the geometrics, electrical, structural. Okay. Let's just see what the top of our city. This looks a little bit more of a fun community than a. It's all like pictures and stuff. Let's see what the top is though of all time. Just out of curiosity. Harassing. Which one of you hooligans? Okay, it's all memes, but let's look at a couple of memes. We could use a break. Okay, so that's just a bad staking, had to share. Okay, that's just making fun of the dead. Don't like that so much. Okay, this is a meme subreddit. This is not what we need. Two more memes, and we'll be done. They're not really funny memes though. Sorry, our surveying. You are the weakest link. Okay. So what if we say transport engineering Reddit? Now that we know that transport engineering is kind of broader. Now it looks like most of it was all the same. Is this one more? We'll go read this one. Oh, let us... one thing I forgot you can do is you can search for specifically threads that somebody posted and what their top comments are. Okay. So this is also a meme, but... Ooh, I'm getting a lot of static. I don't know if that's coming for you guys when I play that GIF. Okay. Water filters can actually be dangerous for plants. Oh, here we go. I like this. Salt use and sand use are for different reasons. Both are typically used in fighting winter weather. Salt before the storm, so the falling snow melts and it sticks, sticking. Sand is used as texture to provide traction while the snow and ice are removed, either mechanically, chemically, or thermally. Sand also causes problems for water bodies. Lots and lots of research is going into replacing both. Spiked. Sand is looking to be replaced with wood chip. That's just a nice thing to know. Okay, and then what were your top posts? Okay, they were just the ones we saw. The kind of the. Here we go. We got a hit though. How to properly set up and run a pilot study. Here's one of the problems. This will be a good example. A problem I've been tasked with tackling. Potholes riddled with the roads. Spring is a very busy time. How adding a new pavement here could be. Would let us fix potholes all year with the cost of propane and diesel. But we don't currently plot what it takes to fill a pothole. All right. So let's take a break because we went bigger than traffic, and this is something that's going to occur a lot. Is what we were thinking about was traffic, but what we thought was our specific carve-out, we don't actually know what the carve-outs are. I should have kept up that one post of all the carve-outs. How many am I gonna hit? I'm gonna hit all the goddamn memes. Okay, fine. I won't pull it up. Let me get focused again. Yeah, so what will happen often is you'll kind of find that like what you thought the carve-outs were, well, you didn't know because it was a new field. So I kind of just let myself flow around into all these different kinds of traffic engineers. But what did I learn? Well, what I learned, something that doesn't happen, is that everybody doesn't just sit around and say, well, yeah, we're obviously studying the Jametons. Jametons feel pretty niche, but nobody seems to have said it was wrong. The excitement seems to have died down. This guy, or this group of people, because it's not just Martin, there were others, sort of came in with a very mathy sort of thing that I would take a lot of time to have to decide if it was right or not. But like this. Now, there could be some sort of misleading such and such and so buried in the top that makes this not. That kind of stuff happens all the time. But at least there seems to be somebody modeling the phantom waves and getting a decent chunk, right? And then when we look in the transport engineering, what we find is it's kind of, like fields everywhere. People aren't really doing it at scale, beside maybe the Aussies and the Kiwis. So maybe traffic stuff from Australia and New Zealand we should be upvoting a little bit more and taking a little bit more credibly. But what there isn't is a big, broad field. So now we can kind of go and answer our questions a little bit more specifically than we could an hour ago. Because we kind of know, all right, there isn't like the grand understanding that everybody knows. It's kind of muddled like every other field. But it looks like what we're trying to explain is a phantom traffic wave. Those seem to be pretty. And if Jametons don't seem popular, to the victor go the spoils, to the people actually sitting and doing the work go the frames. And, we go back here. We give this another look. God, that's a lot of equations. I don't want to read this shit. So, if we go here, stop and go phenomena, stop and go wave, phantom wave. Let's try specifically phantom wave traffic. It's a live science. So, this is just a quick complaint of mine that, and scientists know, this is a ridiculous pair of words. This is like the absolute pop science sort of explanation. They're scientists, that's not a real grouping. Come on. But now there is. This can give us info that there's new information, there's new research they made. So this is like a very non-indexical, and scientists know, come off it. But you can get into the text of it and maybe get into what is actually being said here. And again, somebody analogizing it with schools of fish and flocks of birds, I like that. Don't follow so closely. That was the conclusion of MIT as well, that the defensive behaviors sort of keep it going at low levels of density. And so if you want to stop a traffic jam, you should just keep up those behaviors as long as you can get away with them, of keeping the space. But traffic congestion, it uses, okay, yeah. So this is another high credibility signal I want to point out. When somebody says using information that you wouldn't think to use. So how do I make this point? So this is another one of those cases where sure, it's like, it could be true, it could not be true, it's impossible to say. But when somebody's saying, I introduced a new information flow and got a result, that's a very easy thing to be right about, if you see what I mean. Because another thing I could have done is try to say, hey, I'm going to try and sort this by whether the car is blue or not blue. And, that would probably be nonsense and it would just look the same. It's very easy to just try splitting the things and they look the same. So when this split leads to stuff that seems to be important, it's very easy to just trust them. So if somebody says, I included a new information channel that wasn't typically included and got a good result, that's a very credible claim, because the whole point of saying we're trying to improve our representational frames and not get stuck is that we're trying to figure out all of the information channels we could actually be using, which, because the world is infinitely detailed, there's pretty much always going to be more information channels that you could use, and you just don't understand that you need to use. So I really like, even if I really don't like traffic jams are real and scientists know how to stop them, I really do like getting into this actual paper and seeing like what they're using is including new. So we're going to give this one some time too. Something I'm going to do for the purpose of this video, just in case, I've kind of been like collecting the good ones. So what I would do then is like start bookmarking on Pinboard the good traffic stuff. We'll give this a trill traffic tag. And then later, if I need to come back to it, I'll have these all on tap. So why don't I go ahead, and that one should get saved. This one should get saved. The specific, this one can get closed. And then specifically this, what we want to do is click on the 5 years ago, because that will pop it out again. But then it will get me right to the comment. And then we'll save Crittenden's comment here on Pinboard. And we're probably going to save this one too, but now we're going to, okay. So one form of congestion is common stop and go. Bilateral control suppresses instability. The formation of phantom traffic jams is an emergent property of a system with coupled chains. In the car following paradigm, each adjusts its motion. In bilateral control, the distance to and relative speed of the following vehicle is also used. Trivially, this is at least a little true in that if somebody is riding your ass, maybe you'll speed up because like, oh shit, I got this going. Maybe you'll slow down like, motherfucker, I'm going to just force the issue, you need to stop. But people look in their rearview mirrors, right? Like this is a very sort of formal in bilateral control. In contrast, the distance to and relative speed of the following vehicle is also used. Another way you can frame this sentence is people look at their rearview mirrors sometimes, and people do look at their rearview mirrors sometimes empirically. Otherwise, we would save money by not putting them on the car. So, very credible. Let's continue. It makes the system stable. In bilateral control, each vehicle tries to be halfway between the leading and the following vehicles, at least when they've... This, I don't know. But it can be proven using a function and demonstrated instant... Okay, let's see. So this is where, you know, you have me, and then suddenly how you operationalize this. This is the kind of thing all of the time in science, true, false. Because you're saying true information channel, and this is the framework that makes the information channel perfectly intelligible. Like, true, false, true, false. Maybe people look in their mirrors and something pretty complicated happens, right? and they even say here, well, we have bilateral control as long as they have similar speeds and neither of them is too far away. So what is similar? What is too far? Are those just these buckets you put in because you noticed correctly that people look at their mirrors and then you've got no idea, you know what I mean? So that is the frame where we're going to read the rest of this paper, that this is a very credible sentence and this is a very... But they say it can be demonstrated in simulations. Let's give it a go. Let's take this one seriously because it's recent, but it isn't full of all these goddamn equations. So maybe there'll be some goddamn equations, actually. There's some equations. They're much friendlier looking equations so far. So let's take this one. Let's take this one. Okay. This is interesting. This paper is not explaining where phantom traffic jams come from under traditional driving conditions. There are literally hundreds of papers on traffic flow instabilities. Our purpose is not to survey papers on traffic flow instabilities, nor is it to make comparisons of various explanations for their origin. Cellular Automata, this is what I was talking about, where you analyze, you give them each an agent with their rules versus fluid flows versus shock waves, which is what MIT's, versus eigenvalues of something differential equations. What is the O in an ODE? The DE is differential equation. What's the O? Oh, right. Ode differential equations. Ordinary. God damn it. What kind of different? The normal. They just say differential equations. Come on, man. Why you gotta do me like that, mathematics? This is about the bilateral control method for suppressing traffic flows instabilities. The analysis presented here does not apply to traditional traffic, but to traffic under bilateral control. But, what? If the traditional traffic isn't under bilateral control, then when is traffic under traditional control? Is that not the tradition? Because traditionally, people look in their mirrors. So if you're... So now I don't know when the fuck this model actually... There is a lot of high and low credibility signals here, which just means we just have to look at this in more detail, which we were going to do anyway. But, like, I don't know, man. I have very mixed feelings right now. Stability means the amplitude of oscillation will not be amplified as perturbation is passed. This is the kind of thing, weights of 0.7 and 0.3 for control inputs based on distance. Like, on the one hand, do people look out their windshield more than they look out their mirror? That seems pretty likely to me. Empirically, I would say people probably look out the windshield more than they look at the mirror. Where the fuck did 0.7 and 0.3 come from? That feels about right. Whereas they say they give equal weights, you know. Equal weight at least. This is actually interesting. You know what? No. I like this as a point to make, right? Where I just said, literally 10 seconds ago, people look out the windshield more than they look at the mirror. But I don't like how 0.7 and 0.3 are kind of just feeling constraints. This person says they give equal weight to information about leading and following vehicles. I like this more, even though they're saying equal weight, when people look at the windshield more than they look at the mirror. And why is that? Because the information isn't necessarily a function of how much you look at the thing. You know what's funny? Sorry. I just need to explain why I'm laughing. Which is I was having a discussion with Chris Beezer the other day. And he was making this point how in high-dimensional spaces, when you get to like a 20-dimensional space, most of the constraints for independent variables are levered one way or the other. And most of the information is at the surface. And I had like one beat in my head of like, oh, that's the example I should use to explain what I'm going to say. And then I'm like, wait a minute, motherfucker, did you just want to bring up a 20-dimensional hypercube to try to help explain how cargo? I'm not going to bring up the hypercube. If you already know the hypercube, then you'll appreciate it. Would have been a good analogy. But it's going to take a lot more work to talk about the hypercube, so I won't do it. So what they're saying is maybe people look out the window enough to figure out where car is. They look at the windshield to also figure out where car is. And so the amount of time you spend updating the model, trivially, the fact that we don't all smash our cars all the fucking time is because we look at both the windshield and the mirror enough to have a pretty good idea where car is there, where car is there. And then the rest of our gaze attention is for some other stuff unrelated to the information encoded in car position velocity. That seems pretty likely. I certainly like just trying to not weight the information and see if it works over coming up with some stuff arbitrarily. So that is why I like this more, even though I did just say people probably look out the windshield more than the mirror. So there's a point there. There's a more specific point involving a hypercube, and you'll never pry it out of me. Okay. They're trying to build a more accurate model of existing traffic, not develop a new control rule to suppress traffic flow instabilities. In their context, bidirectional means if the following car approaches rapidly, then maybe some drivers will choose to change lanes. This is different from an automated system that adjusts the acceleration continuously based on differences in position and speed. Very good paragraph. Very good paragraph, because what they're saying is that words do not have inherent meaning. If you've read Desystemized, you know I'm on this all the time. Meaning as a product of interaction and how it actually embeds in systems. And sort of nothing is concealed in terms of there's no secret meaning of a word that people don't know. It's entirely engraved in its systems of interaction. And so when they're saying is, when you say bidirectional, it's really just reducing down to this. That's a very credible claim to make about, well, not a very credible claim to make about somebody else's work. Because there's also straw manning and there's rivalries, and so maybe that's not quite right. Maybe more what I'm trying to say is when somebody says, listen, you know, we're both using the same word, but we have a rich operationalization of it. And in your case, this is really what's happening. More than 50% of the time, I would believe the person saying, you know, this is what their word is meant in their context, because we're trying to make it mean something more rich. But I shouldn't say high credibility. It's not high credible in the same way that, you know, Crenandon complaining on Reddit was highly credible, right? So we should check ourselves a little there. So they're saying to suppress traffic flow instabilities, you use both. You use the relative speeds. You emphasize control contributions equally. Okay. This also does kind of help explain when I was talking earlier, how they're saying this isn't about, you know, traditional traffic flow, then what is it about? So this is saying, what is there a rule that if everybody agreed to it would make traffic go down, independent from how often it actually happens? Which is very good, because, again, when I say I'm reading a new field, one thing that could have happened here is that the mystical powers of herd intelligence has led to collective behavior that already dampens traffic about as well as traffic could be dampened. That was a possibility when I started this video, right? And so now, if it is the case that there really are rules that if everybody followed them would reduce traffic much more than we have traffic now, that would be very interesting. And it's also very interesting, and now I'm thinking about this, and this is my lens reading this paper, which is if you're the only one who does this rule, does it hurt you and how? Because these are two very, very different ways this could go. One way could be if you follow this bilateral control rule that isn't the natural, which is what this earlier bit implied, although we'll kind of get to more as we get more down the paper, then if you do it, it doesn't really hurt you. It's just kind of a new way to drive. Doesn't really do much. But the more people that drive this way, the better the roads will be. Right? That's one world. And then it's kind of like an adoption evangelization model. Like, just tell people to do this. And again, we got this from this PopSci guy, which I am going to open now because I want to go back to it after I read the paper. Because this... Why are you getting so staticky? Okay, I really hope this isn't coming through on the video because I just got an enormous burst of static from presumably an ad on this page. Ugh. Because they just say there's no advantage of riding up a tailpipe. So they're talking about adding it to tail. Okay, I kind of spoiled the paper when we read the PopSci. So the point is, if this is just a rule to subscribe to that helps you, then it's an evangelization model, and you just want people to do it, right? It could also be that bilateral control works when everybody does it, but you get bad outcomes doing it yourself. Either you go slower, maybe it makes things worse in less people. That's another thing that could happen. And then it's a game theory problem called a stag hunt, which is sort of the less popular cousin of Prisoner's Dilemma. And a stag hunt is one where if everyone cooperates, you get the best outcome. But if some people are defecting, you want to defect too. And the model is you can either work with all your buddies to catch a stag, or you can go catch a rabbit, but then if the stag goes past you, it will escape. Like, everybody needs to hunt the stag to get the stag. If some people get rabbits, they at least get rabbit. The stag's going to get away, and then you want to get a rabbit too, because you guys, there's already not enough people to get a stag, right? So is bilateral control systems, are they a stag hunt? And that's a question now I can read this paper with that lens. And I didn't even know to have that lens coming into reading the new field. So, fun example. Okay. A simple car following a control system produces an acceleration command as its output. Vdes is the speed desired, which may or may not be the same as the speed limit. Furthermore, they have a desired separation. Okay. So what they're saying is there's two things you can control: how fast you want to go, how far away you want to be, which may be a fixed quality or may vary with speed as in constant time headway, where Vdes equals VCT. Okay. So, to translate this a little bit, because this was a little unnecessarily... Well, I mean, I guess I say unnecessarily. Probably to get published, you've got to talk in this sort of lens. It's not a very helpful sort of framing. Where did my text I highlighted? Why did my highlight go away when I scrolled? That was weird. So what they're saying is, maybe your desired separation is I want to be 100 feet away, but a more sensible way for distance is I want to be a certain number of seconds away if they slam on the brakes. Which means that the faster you guys are going, the more gap you want because it's going to get swallowed up. But also, maybe you're just kind of like, I'm driving on the highway has the same speed limit, so I have this fixed DDES about the highway speed. Never mind that if we were going slower, it could be closer, right? So, but that's the point, is that what they're saying is you can control how far away you want to be and how fast you want to be going. And, I mean, people want to get to where they're going, and usually VDES is like the speed limit, right? So it may or may not be the same as speed limit. It often is. So probably what they're saying is that DDES is the independent variable you could think to change yourself as a takeaway. Shown here is a simple model. See, who are these for, man? I don't like these diagrams. Maybe there's somebody in the world who likes these diagrams. I don't like these diagrams. I'm going to just read what they're saying. KC is the gain of feedback. Okay, let me try to understand what they're meaning by gain of feedback. The children outside are yelling. Hopefully that doesn't make the video unwatchable. It's the gain of feedback based on the degree differences of distances. Okay, so I think the Ks are just saying, like, this is what goes into whether you're going to accelerate or decelerate. That's how I'm going to choose to interpret it and see. I'm going to read this and see if that makes it silly. Okay, I like this. This is another good paragraph in that one very easy way to sanity check whether a model is sensible or whether a model is not sensible is when you take away some of the complexity stuff, does this reduce to simpler models we already understand, right? So your model of how much you should bring an umbrella, what probability to bring an umbrella, well, on a day without rain, it's simply 0, right? And somebody who can stop and say, by the way, when this dimension of variation goes away, the model collapses into spitting out the same thing. If your model is correctly listening to this channel of information, then a lot of times it should collapse when the channel collapses, right? So this, when there's no following vehicle, you can simply revert to traditional call following, and when there's no leading vehicle, control can devolve to traditional cruise control. This is a sentence that suggests this model might actually be useful, because they're not sort of adding a bunch of parameters because they fucking love parameters so much. Right, they're saying that when you have these information channels, you need to use them in this sophisticated way. But if you don't have them, then haha, whee. A virtual following vehicle can be invoked that uses traditional call following, and the position and relative velocity of this virtual vehicle is used by the bilateral control system of the actual last vehicle. Similarly, if there's no leading vehicle, a virtual vehicle can be invoked that uses simple cruise control. Okay. So the two expressions are finite differences that correspond to second order spatial derivatives of position and speed. So the change, for people who don't know, the derivative is the rate of change. And a second order derivative is the rate of change of the rate of change. So a first order derivative is how much something changes. A second order derivative is how much the change changes, more or less. So the steady state, if the vehicles are uniformly spaced a common distance apart and traveling at common speed, that is one solution to the system of ordinary differential equations, which makes sense. If everyone's going the same speed, the same distance apart, you shouldn't get weird mathy stuff that you need. You should be able to set some stuff to 0. Very good math tip. When you have a model, try setting some stuff to 0 and see what happens and make sure it makes sense. Which is basically the same point as what I was saying earlier about when a channel collapses, the model should often become much simpler because that's what it means to listen to a channel, right? So, and again, when I skim this, I'm trying to get the vibe of I'm not actually sitting down and thinking about each of these equations. I don't want you to think that, oh my God, that Colin is such a genius. He's just internal. I'm not really. I'm half-ass scrolling, getting to the point, because what matters is that I know where just like with this guy, although these are a lot friendlier than these. This would be much easier to get a strong understanding if I needed it, but I still don't need it. What I need to know is that somebody is kind of rigorously looking at it, and I'm going to kind of look at these hints for how well and how credible they are. And the reason I keep talking about trying to guess the credibility is that then I can just read their conclusions and see how much I agree with them. Maybe it comes to the point where I need to understand this stuff, and if so, I will pinboard it, and then I will take the time. But I'm reading a new field, and that means that's not my goal. Nobody's asking me when they say to understand traffic flows, do I need to be able to derive these bilateral control differential equations? Well, no. I don't even know if bilateral control works. I'm going to skim and try to focus on that first. The larger proportional feedback gain, the faster disturbances travel away from their source. Stability means that, this is another sentence that I like, in the context of this paper, when we say stability, what we mean is that if you perturb it, it decays. So this is positive versus negative feedback, where, if you're in a bowl and you flick a ball, right, then the ball is going to go somewhere off the center, and then it's going to fall back to the center of your bowl. That's negative feedback, right? If you have a perturbation, it decays. You could also put the ball on top of a mountain where it stopped and you flick it, it's going to keep going. It's never going to come back. It's going to roll down. That's positive feedback. So what they're just saying is when we talk about the stability of bilateral control, what we're saying is that this is a rule that if you follow it, it creates this sort of bowl where the jammeton happens. These guys probably didn't call it jammetons either. But the traffic's gonna come back to the steady state that it was before the perturbation. Which in this case is, let's say there was a deer that came out ahead. It was like, oh shit, what? Oh, the deer's not coming on the road, it's fine. That's a perturbation. I don't actually say that word out loud that often. Perturbation? I don't know. Perturbation. Happens. And then how quickly is stuff gonna get back together? This means the amplitude of the response must be smaller than the amplitude of the excitation. In other words, if you slam on the brakes because of the deer, this model is assuming that the guy behind you isn't slamming on the brakes more comprehensively in response to you because of a deer they can't see than you yourself did. If we introduce a disturbance, it will lead to waves traveling away that point in both directions with speed root kd, which was like that net difference-y thing. Okay, the steady state solution does not decay. Wait, what? Let's just sit and visualize this for a second. Because I think what this is saying is that we're all... So remember, we talked about the equation 6 here. We did have an intuition that this is just saying all your cars are... Everybody's going the same speed. Everybody's got the same distance. I slam on the brakes because of the deer. Okay, no, this does sort of make sense to me. So what they're saying is in this... In the steady state solution, where you don't weight your rates of change based on what's happening at all, then I am car 0 in the chain. I see the deer, I slam on the brakes. Now, the chase car, seeing you slam on the brakes suddenly because of the deer, is, oh, and you slam on the brakes exactly as much as I did, and then the car behind you slams exactly as much. So it's not saying, when it says the perturbation doesn't decay, that doesn't mean that we create this phantom wave ex nihilo. Because I was saying it feels really weird that in this constant guy, we're going to get the phantom wave. I think it's saying we're going to get one wave, but we're not going to get the acceleration. We're going to get one jammeton. Again, in terms of the willingness to look stupid, I'm going to just sometimes say jammeton, sometimes say... I don't know if jammeton's good. I'm going to try it sometimes and see if I like it. This is saying that... which is sort of your expressions of how much you're going to adjust based on your desired velocity and your desired distance from the other cars, that if you just kind of set that all to 0, and you just... I'm not exactly sure what it means to set KD to 0, but if you do, then what they're saying is that stop, go, and then exactly one jammeton goes, not in this sort of accelerationalist wave-spawning way that people are worried about with traffic. It's just going to be one slowdown event. It goes... Why'd that guy slam on the brakes? Why'd that guy slam? Why'd that guy? Okay. I have the intuition for what's happening now when they say the perturbation doesn't decay. And so what they're saying with bilateral control is a little bit stronger than I was thinking. I was kind of thinking, like, how do we stop these these things from getting out of control. Whereas the bilateral control is even saying on the level of that first Jamaton that's coming, how do I even stop that? That one brake slam from that one deer from it's not even going to reach the end of our chain with bilateral control, is what they're saying. But it did also reveal that the proportional feedback gain, I'm still not totally sure of what it means to set that to 0. So let's read this and see if we get a better sense. Maybe I have to look at that. I don't want to have to understand that diagram, though. I hate those diagrams. I don't like these at all. I don't want to. Let's see if we can get away with it. Let's try. It might appear we could make the decay time constant arbitrarily small by making the speed gain very large. It seems let me read this. Let me read this whole thing. It would appear we can make the decaying waves propagate at arbitrarily high velocities by making the positional gain KD very large. However, as is common in feedback systems, aspects of the real system not modified in the simplified versions will likely lead to instabilities when the gains become too large in the real systems. This includes effects due to unmodeled delays and effects introduced by the approximation of the mixed continuous discrete ODE, ordinary differential equation, by a continuous PDE, partial differential equation. Furthermore, passenger comfort would be impacted by high gain factors leading to accelerations or decelerations higher than, say, plus or minus 3 meters per second squared. So that was a very helpful sentence for me, because what they're saying is this is saying, how badly am I willing to change my behavior to keep my desired positional? And KV is how much am I willing to change my speed to keep on the speed that I want to go. And what they're saying is you can set your willingness, this is your willingness to change what you're doing. You can set it very high, but then what that means is that the guy in the front kind of maybe starts to think about whether or not they may have seen the deer and they slow, and then you're like, boom, instantly, I'm going to totally change my speed to get to where I want to go. And what they're saying is if you listen too hard to these information channels, then you change too much. So on one hand, we have KV0, KD0. And KV0, KD0 is saying car, speed, deer, stop, car stop, car stop, one Jamaton, thunk, at KD0, KV0. These are saying if you're willing to take that and change your gain and loss of speed more reflexibly and change your second order rules based on what's happening, then you can sort of say, I'm willing to get some closer while you're stopping, and then we'll open it up again or something. I'm not sure if that's an accurate narrativization. I still got to get that. But what they're saying is if you respond more flexibly to that information channel, then maybe you slow down less. No, I'm still a little unsure of what's happening. I'm not sure how much I trust what I just said. Let me read the independent variable. I think I'm kind of getting the idea, though, that a high... Yeah. That this... that KD0, KV0 is about responsiveness, and if they're high, you're like accelerating and decelerating very quickly. If they're high, and if they're low, you're basically ignoring the traffic ahead. Wait a minute. So I thought that KD0, KV0, like I said, was I'm going to stop exactly the way you stopped to not hit you. But they're saying to ignore the traffic ahead. That would make more sense in terms of responsiveness, but is this just a model where you're just crashing into the guy's fucking fender? Is that what they're saying? Still a little unsure of what KD0, KV0 is then. Because on the one hand, it feels like it's sort of like the dumb solution that suppresses the information channels, and that's fine. But then if you're ignoring the, like, how are you, I don't know. I'm going to keep going, though. The point is, there's a lot of meat on this bone, and I want to point out that what I didn't get to was that I got here because I already knew I was looking for phantom waves, and that I didn't want the pop-side treatment, but I wanted to get to the real thing, because this is a very bad non-indexical way to talk about what they're actually talking about. So, reading a new field. As I struggle through this paper, it's worth noting that it wasn't trivial necessarily to get to this paper. So, I at least have that for my pride. Okay. N is not the horizontal distance, is a continuous analog of the sequential vehicle number. It increases by 1 as we move from one vehicle to the next. This means that the wave velocities derived are relative to the moving traffic, not the road. The speed of propagation of disturbances is higher in areas of lower vehicle density. I'm gonna just watch these simulations. Let's just get to what gets simulated here. So, okay. All vehicles are moving at the same speed corresponding to the 45-degree angle in the graphic. Okay, yeah, so here is the deer thing. After a second, a vehicle that started at the origin brakes hard. A deceleration of 5 meters per second squared for 2 seconds. With car following, there is, of course, no effect on downstream vehicles. Okay, so this sentence helped me a lot. With car following, there is, of course, no effect on downstream vehicles, i.e. to the right of the vehicle that caused the disturbance. So what we're saying is that this is like the event. I wonder if I can, make this bigger. And then it's going. And what they're saying is, of course, all these lines are still horizontal. Because this is saying this is what's happening to the cars behind. And this is what's happening to the cars ahead. And I'm not going to slam on my brakes because you saw a deer behind me. So, okay. The horizontal axis is difference in meters. The vertical is time in seconds. The progression of each vehicle is shown by a curve, which becomes vertical when you're stopped in traffic. Note the jam appearing about 45 seconds and moving upstream. And then this is saying bilateral. Vehicle starting at lower left brakes sharply at 1 minute as in the previous figure, but the damped wave of disturbances move upstream and downstream. No traffic jam develops, and there's no long-term disturbance of the flow. Oh, so is that the point? When I just said, well, I don't slam on the brakes because the guy behind me did, but is this saying I should adjust my driving a little bit? Because, in the traditional... Can I zoom this even more? In the traditional model, it really is... But we can see here, it does get a little wiggly for the leading cars as well as the following cars, and that doing so has overall stopped this whole gnarly wave from persisting even 2 minutes on. The cars are getting thunked. Whereas this was like, you gotta zoom in like fucking Sherlock Holmes to see even the little wiggly. So that's the point, I think, of this. So I wonder if this is gonna... Oh, shit. My camera went away. Hopefully that wasn't happening forever. Not that it really matters, I guess. I just feel like knowing how much I look like I care is an information channel. And we want to keep them. Here's Katie gave me... Here's care equals 0, and it will reduce to a trivial case. Okay. So I wonder if this is going to end with a usable rule of what you should do based on weird stuff happening behind you. That would be really cool. And we'll see. Or if that's one of the more stag hunty things where everybody needs to do it for it to help. So. After the initial disturbance, there are no effects near the vehicle that was the distal cause of the problem. So, let's read that sentence again. After the initial disturbance, there are no effects near a vehicle that was the distal cause of the problem. Oh, and that's saying because that's the red line. So, yeah, okay. So red line is me through time. So the red line is the guy who saw the deer, and they always did this for 2 seconds. This part's the same. And in both the cases, deer guy himself, but then everyone else and then the wave went backwards. Whereas here, because everyone's following the flow control, and was that all stuff? Okay. With bilateral control, this has dampened waves going forward and backward. The forward wave is dilationary, which means it's making them farther apart. Backwards wave is compressive. The traveling waves... Oh, okay, this is going to be helpful. So they made one that was 4 times as strong to make it more useful. So the forward wave moves 44 meters per second, and the backward waves move 6 meters per second. So let's go look at this one now, the 2 times 1. So then... So, is it the same where for A is... Oh no, A is... Okay, so this is still bilateral. So there's no traffic flow. Illustrating the ability of bilateral control to suppress impending instabilities. We start with car following control for 45 seconds, but then switch to bilateral control. The traffic jam that was developing under car following is resolved under bilateral, and the semi-periodic oscillations are resolved as well. So saying here at 45 seconds, can you tell from this that the rule changed? And you can, because you'll notice here that shading led to more shading under car following, and then under this it's okay. I think I'm convinced. This is very credible. And I'm not just saying that this time. So, but now let's see. Okay. It should be noted that car following models can be made string stable using seriously high control gains, but as discussed in Appendix A, higher gains come with changes that influence passenger comfort. There's no corresponding restrictions on these gains in bilateral control, just that they be positive. Okay. This is a good time to start implementing bilateral control, since vehicles with adaptive cruise control already have the required control mechanisms as well as the forward-facing sensors. All that is required is addition to rearward-facing sensors and a change in the control algorithm to bilateral control as presented here. And I like this because these people are going to look at these. You know, this is about presenting them, but they still want to look at it again. And I want them specifically to tell me. So this is great. So they're saying in the car following models, there's always frequencies of disturbances that are amplified as they're propagated upstream. I love when it's well known that exponential functions of times are eigenfunctions of such systems. Well known? I didn't. Oh, god damn it, the camera turned off again. I was doing that for a bit. I want it on in general. I think it's like my mouse is like sometimes doing something on this screen that's turning it off on this one. Okay. We're way too committed to go back now. Anyway. So they're saying... Yeah, and this is saying, for their first model, they did it where the desired separation is constant, but like we were saying, generally speaking, it's more sensible to have your desired separation include your speed as a parameter, right? That you want to be farther away from the person in front of you if you all are going faster. That didn't really help, though. It's easy to show that this is the safe following distance. Reaction speed is not just perceptual mental, it's shifting the foot from accelerator to brake and delay in response. This derivation assumes that vehicles can decelerate at the same rate and they are initially traveling at the same speed. In practice, this is rarely the case. Okay. So, I think we learned a lot here. The problem is, what we didn't necessarily learn, because they were saying this is how we should modify our cruise control systems. But what I don't think I know, and I'm worried because I think I probably should be able to figure it out from this paper, but I haven't yet, is what this means in terms of what should you do without your cruise control on if you want to dampen cars. So I can tell that what they're saying is you need to take the information of the car behind you. So it was a dilationary wave forward and compressive backwards, right? Let me go find that again. Okay. So, but it says only in this particular case, which may not mean general. I think what this is saying is that if you notice somebody braking in your rearview mirror, you should look into whether you can go a little bit faster to open up more space for them to recover. But you should only do that, you should do that in balance with the car in front of you. So what they're saying, I think, and I'm not certain about this, but I think what they're saying is a takeaway you can do in traffic is that if somebody behind you needs to slow down suddenly, then you should look into trying to propagate a forward dilationary wave by going a little faster. Because remember, a dilationary means that you're increasing the space between you. So here's this guy, and then they go, and you go bloop. So try to send that wave where you accelerate a little bit, but in balance, because you're also taking, you're trying to keep maximum distance from the car in front of you as well. But you try to balance those two things, and if you do that, then this dilationary wave is going to go, and this is going to go very fast. The forward wave was, how much faster? It was way faster, right? Yeah, 44 meters per second, and the backward wave was about 6 meters per second, right? So what they're saying is that if you let this forward wave go thunk, dilating quickly, then you're going to send less of a wave backwards, and the backwards wave is the compressive wave, which is what causes a traffic jam. So I contend that, and if I went and understood these differential equations more detail, that this diagram more detail, I would have a more confident basis to say this, but I'm pretty sure what this is saying is that if you let yourself accelerate, you see this dilationary wave here in bilateral control, where you're kind of opening up the distances between the cars, then the net result is that the wave goes away. So look in your rearview mirror, and if it looks like it's, the space between you guys, or your relative speeds, are changing, maybe take an action to put it back. But I'm not certain. I think that's what it's saying, though. Because if you follow that control, then they're able to more quickly speed up again after the disturbance, because there's more space for them to speed up in. I don't know. It seems kind of what they're talking about. But now we know that you analyze the traffic flow, but if you want to fix it, you probably need bilateral control. That is something I certainly believe. Even if I don't understand necessarily how you, an individual, does it, and does this do anything, or does the bilateral control only work if everyone's following the rule and you're just this guy who has to, like... And that's actually pretty likely that there could be a stag hunt thing here where you're meant to speed up a little and let this dilationary wave get through because the dilationary wave is burning off a compressive wave going backwards. But in practice, as soon as you start doing it, you just have to slow right back down again because the person in front of you isn't trying to propagate the dilationary wave, because the wave will only go until the first person who's doing car following and not bilateral control, and then you have to instantly slow back down again, and your passengers are uncomfortable and nothing happened. So that could be the stag hunty kind of aspect to it. But either way, I mean, until I read this, I never thought about car following models versus bilateral control models. And I think that the model using more, I think those diagrams are pretty convincing that using that extra information makes your model more robust. And now we're going to quick go to the PopSci here. Let's see what they say. So you increase the spacing of the vehicles. Try to keep halfway between the robot in front and the one behind. Oh, so are you slowing and not speeding up to give them more space? Do I have it backwards? I think I have it backwards. I think it's actually saying the other way around, where bilateral control means if the guy behind you hits the brakes, you should slow down a little. But then how is it dilationary? Let me draw this out. So this guy stops. I want to stay halfway between the two cars. And so rather than continuing at a speed, I slow myself down somewhat. Not dramatically, because how much I slow down to keep that between is dependent on KV, KD, and too much of those just makes my insurance uncomfortable. I slow it down some. Because then isn't that a compressive wave? And how is that a dilationary wave? That's what I'm missing. Because this is a very understandable, like bilateral control is saying, try to stay halfway between the two cars. Oh, can I watch this? Oh, let's watch it. Let's watch it. Fuck yeah. Let's watch it. Video time. Video time. Maybe I'll understand. So now we're going to think about this in terms of compressive and dilationary waves, because that's what I'm struggling with. So they're saying at first... Is there audio? Okay, so they were saying at first they were doing regular. So let's try to understand these traffic waves. So, okay. Somebody hit the brakes, and now we can see in the here kind of region, there's a lot of start stop going. And it's when the lights flash is when we're going to switch to bilateral control. So we can see the phantom wave piling up. So I'm looking at like 15 right now, 16, 17, and then now, yeah, 19, the wave is stacked up. Okay. What I need to understand is like what I'm doing and what kind of wave that's saying in terms of paying attention to my following car. So I'm looking at sort of like, so like right now, like 12, where 12 is, I'm thinking of that as like the sort of the head of the current thing. And then I'm looking at their leader who just gets going when it stops. And I want to understand what bilateral control is doing sort of differently. But they're still not on bilateral yet. But I'm just trying to understand the the waves. So it's definitely a compressive wave. Okay, so the lights flicker, and now they're on bilateral control. All right. Okay, so like looking on, so like where 8 is now. Okay, now I gotta go to like where 7 is. Okay, I think I see it now that I can see the robots. So I think I was wrong the first time. Willingness to look stupid. It's not that you should accelerate like more when the guy's behind you to give them more space. I think what it's saying is when they talk about it being a dilationary wave, it looks like what is happening, and I wonder if I can like pick a number quick enough to point it out. So like, yeah, like look where 4 is right now, and let's follow 4 for a second. Yeah. 4 I think is going to get good in a second here. So like looking at 3 and 4 together. So notice that they were a little compressed. Oh, they're going to switch back to car leading. No, I was just getting it. I saw your legs move. Okay, no, okay, we're good. We're good. Oh wait, I can just rewind. I'm an idiot. I can like verify that it's going to do the thing and then... Okay. So let's look now. Like here. Is my mouse... Oh, my mouse doesn't... It kind of shows up on my stream, it looks like. Okay. Like in the top center here. So when we say it's a dilationary wave, what they're saying is when you get post-jammed, but you see that the guy behind you is jammed, or like the person behind you slams on the brake, then what you do is you accelerate slower, you modulate, and then it's like a dilationary wave because it's like inflating the distance between you because you're not claiming all of the space that is yours by right. You're not speeding out of the jam. You're inflating to keep a halfway distance between you and the next car. That is surprising because you would think that just taking the space that the person behind you can go as much as they can. But now we're back on car forward, so we can kind of look again and see. So the jam is clearing up like where 18 is now. And then 18 goes vroom. And everybody's going vroom. Okay, but then as soon as you get to a slowdown... So that's not helping the backwards compressive wave at all. So I guess there is a little bit of stag hunt to this then, right? Because, and we saw on those graphs, I'm not going to pull them up because I want to let the robot video play all the way. But what we saw on the graph was that the car itself wasn't influenced by its disturbance. So, yes, there is that stag hunt aspect to this, and that if you were claiming all of the forward space that was yours by right, having exited a patch of slowness or whatever, right, even though the person behind you is still quite slow, then you're going to get there incrementally faster than accelerating less than you are sort of... Because what you're saying in bilateral control versus car following is that I'm willing to take the information of what's happening behind me just as much as what's happening ahead. And that makes it a dilationary wave because the first person maybe zips out to open field because there's no, car following or behinding, but then you are like, shoo. So that compressive wave, as it's going backwards through, you are acceding to that compressive wave by not accelerating as much as you would be allowed to. But by doing so, what that means is that essentially you're letting some of that impact, for lack of a better word, that would all be spent on the backwards compressive wave go quickly forward instead. And that's why it's dilating. It's increasing the speed between all the cars in front because each car is sort of not accelerating as much as it should. So the gap opens up some, but then that's going to, like, in a kind of step function really quickly, boom, 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 until it's eaten up all it deserved to. Yeah. So it's stag hunting in the sense that you will get to where you're going a tiny, tiny amount slower because you're not taking all of the acceleration you're owed. But if you just constantly try to keep the same amount of distance between the car, you and the car in front of you, then overall it creates a kinder ecosystem. So it is a coordination problem where you benefit, although it's not quite a pure stag hunt because it's not that much skin off your back to just... You're not even, like, slowing down, I think. The point is that you're just not accelerating as much as you could be. And that's what makes it a dilationary wave. That you're not just trying to match and be a safe distance with the car in front of you, but if the car behind you is way slow, you kind of modulate how quickly you try to match the leading car. And you try to match it less quickly to give the person behind you some time to catch up. I think I understand it now. So we see there was both. What the pop sci let me do, right, was that I had never kind of, in this paper, they had never used, like, that really formal phrasing, or not the really formal, sorry, exactly the opposite. The very informal phrasing when the robot tries to keep itself halfway between the robot in front and the one behind. And I needed that to understand it. But scientists know how to stop them, you know what I mean? It's a very sort of grandiose term, and really what we're just talking about is this. And I had to kind of read this to understand what this was saying about basically the forward and backwards wave. And now I understand why it's a dilationary wave even when you're slowing down, because the point is the person in the very front doesn't have that same need to slow down, and so they're kind of accelerating at the rate they want to go, and then you are dilating because you're not instantly matching them, which is the K0, KV0, KD0, but you're sort of like letting yourself look at back behind you. Okay, well, this guy's not really coming, so I'm going to, gradually get my way to being between you two. And then that's what's going to propagate the forward wave through you. You, by making that decision, are propagating a forward wave. And if the person in front of you follows this rule, the forward wave will get to keep going and going and going. And the more you can do that, the better it is, because the forward wave is so much faster than the backwards compressive wave. So to the extent you've got room to dilate in front, you let it. And then the more people who agree to that rule, the more of the energy of the disturbance gets spent on a fast-moving dilationary forward wave instead of the bad compressive wave. So, to be a good traffic citizen, you should just try to stay halfway between the leading car and the following car, modulo some complexity in multi-lane, and I don't know how you would handle that, but that should be your intuition. And I think I understand it now. I think it's right. I think it's a great example of how I was saying completely the wrong reason earlier. But if I had just kind of thought to myself, like, you know what I mean? Then what? Am I actually trying to understand these fucking equations? I still don't understand the fucking equations. That would take a lot of time. And this is reading a new field quickly. So instead what I did is I tried an intuition, and I found that I didn't like it. And that let me keep looking. And so now what I can do is look at who's citing this paper. I don't care about autonomous vehicles because I want rules for people. That's a bold claim. I like this one. I'm getting a little tired, so we're gonna call this kind of soon. Although I guess you have the privilege of reading the times, like the total length of the video. So you actually know way better than I do how long this video lasts. Why am I trying to explain it to you? I don't want local wireless. I am interested to hear how they actually proved that the traffic balance was restored. Oh, but I have to pay for this one? Is this not free? Fuck you. But okay. Bilateral control traffic. How to. Driver friendly. That's what I wanted. Driver friendly bilateral control. Okay. This is just... Is this the same? This is Leon Wang and Berthold Horn. And this was... Okay, yeah. So it's the same people. And the fact that they're trying to make it... They're working with Toyota, which is something. But these are the people who are doing... Oh, this is the Halsey sale team. That's too many. I wanted specifically... Ah, yes. So maybe it's saying if you just do it, it doesn't. Maybe it is a little more stag hunty in that if you do it yourself, it doesn't help anything, but you could start getting into the habit because if everyone does it, it will help. Okay. Birds have been doing this for centuries. This is where, like I was saying, my complexity science background. Okay. According to Horn, even if just a small... This is what I would really like to know. That would be a real feather in the cap of this, is the small, like, how small is small? Because the thing about small numbers is that some are smaller than others. So... Yeah, the density of entire highways. I'm very interested in that. Are you going to tell me which one of those papers it is, buddy? Or is it hiding? Nice. So the red car is the one who's going to stop, and then this is saying as you're behind red. Okay. So look at the guy in front of red in bilateral control. How much of that is determined on the predicated on it being a loop, though? You know what I mean? Like, how much can you use a loop as a model for this stuff? I don't know. So this is the first proposal, but I don't want that. I want these new ones he was talking about. Are we going to see those like on this page, maybe? This is where I might want to not be streaming when I read. Somehow, I may manage to find myself the text of this paper, and I will probably not record myself doing it on video. But... Okay. You know what? I've been going 2 hours, 20 minutes, says on the side. This is the kind of thing it's annoying to sustain for long periods of time. People who tell you that they work by sitting down in a chair and doing intellectual work for 8 hours straight are lying to you and lying to themselves. So let's just try to take a step back. Where did we get to? All we started with was metropolitan traffic flow, traffic engineering, whatever. What did we learn in terms of getting it? What did we learn is that we don't have the greatest understanding of exactly what causes traffic jams. Some people will do it agentially, some people will do it through fluid dynamics, whatever. There's definite agreement that you get these phantom traffic waves, which some people like to call jammatons. Not everybody takes jammatons. And the jammaton thing, it looks like they really were hoping here in 2009 it was going to catch on. Jammatons haven't exactly caught on, but they show up in the news. There's definitely spontaneous wave formations, and it appears that to stop these spontaneous wave things, you need cars to have bilateral control. And bilateral control is where you take the cars behind you into consideration, and you, with some degree of tolerance that is not infinite, because infinite would have driver comfort problems, you try to keep the distance between you and the car in front and the car in behind. You want to try to be right in the middle, willing to accelerate and decelerate a moderate amount in order to do so. And that if some proportion of these drivers do this, we will get better traffic. Is it worth it for you as an individual to just do this? Maybe, maybe not. There was that one article here that says small percentage, but like 0.1% is small, 1% is small, 10% is small, but those are very different stories in terms of whether you, John Q. Public, should just start doing this. What I would say is try it for a day. Does it make you go that much slower than where you're going? Is it that much more annoying than how you were driving? If not, then why not get used to this? Because it sounds like if everybody did it, the world would be better. You know what I mean? And maybe it will catch on and become super popular. But I don't know how small that is. It looks like probably, and I'm going to mark this, because if I was going to keep this up, the next thing I would do, if my mission for reading the new field was to say, hey, should I run around evangelizing that everyone just do bilateral control? Well, unfortunately, a really big part of that is small 0.1%. Is it 1%? Is it 10%? Whatever. Right? And people are working on it very recently, and so it seems like it might be Toyotas first. So it could be in the near future that whether or not there's a traffic jam, one of the variables is the proportion of Toyotas that are in that stream of cars, and that's something to do. We had the video. The video was very useful. Did I add this already? One nice thing about Pinboard, I can do this, and if I had already added it, it would warn me. Oh, I forgot my traffic tag. Did I forget on some others? I'm going to do that now before I forget. Yeah, these last two. So I now have in Pinboard this nice little set of traffic-y stuff. And then, yes, and then we got to learn, what did we learn about transport and traffic engineering? It was sort of, I'm not going to say a dead end in terms of the traffic stuff, but it looks like right now, this theory stuff really is sort of, coming into practice. It doesn't look like this is at the level where individual people are making these really strong, like the theory of what actually drives traffic seems really nebulous. And that is interesting in the sense that it could have also been very possible that Kiernaden just has this perfect understanding of how traffic works, and it's just like, oh, traffic, that's just about whether you as the civil engineer puts the bips and bobs in the right way, right? That's one way it could have ended, and as it happens, that isn't. As it happens, we're still trying to figure out these frameworks at all about getting a good sense of what is happening with these traffic waves. And it's not very well formalized, even if that one guy looking at that one road in Germany really wanted it to be well formalized. But we did get a lot of interesting stuff we learned about transport and traffic engineering and sort of how it works, and that, EAM is going to be the future, and all this cool stuff that it was grateful to learn. But what it seems like is that this sort of making the traffic go day-to-day understanding is quite well divorced from this sort of frontier work, and that this frontier work is people playing with robots on circular tracks, and that's another thing that we have no idea, I think. All these examples did seem to be circular tracks, and that the in-out, we don't know how much that complicates all this stuff. But it does seem like what traffic engineers do isn't really this. That this and this and this are quite different is the vibe that I would say. That if you're trying to understand how you would make a stretch of highway, that we don't have this well-formalized understandings of how traffic flows on that highway that would influence. And I think that's because it's that negative that sort of comes that, these people who were quite thorough in their, their views of what's happening, but people aren't. I would say my suspicion is that people today aren't making roads in specific ways that annihilate traffic jams. But having said that, and I know I kind of pitched my voice like this as a conclusion, but this is actually such a natural next step. How do you make a road that has fewer traffic jams? Because my contention is that this isn't something that we really understand. But suddenly, I want to quick go and have a look at some of this stuff. I promise we're almost done. So bottlenecks, they say you can widen, stop queues, meter and use speed harmonization. Should be lanes. I actually have some stuff to say about this. What I want to do. Who are these people, by the way? Okay, they're just people who've got plans about doing traffic in the New York area. I don't really like Vox. I want to just kind of see what they're... Yeah, so this is the I had the rant really near the start of the video, the Zeynep thing about second order effects, and this is that. I'm closing this tab. Don't change lanes so much. Yeah, notice all the shockwaves need the circular roads, though. But in a real traffic jam, you know what I mean? It never sort of comes around on the horn again in almost all normal traffic jams. And is there a case that what you're actually solving for is the circular? Oh my god, that is... I don't even want to think about what happens to my YouTube recommendations if these guys get on there. They're... Ugh. Okay, but this is a real study. So if this tells me that it was just as many jams, you know what I mean, that the second order overrode the first, that would be interesting. So I dislike urban sprawl, but not so much that I want to instantly believe that all roads make more traffic jams. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to kind of just jump right to, especially because I'm kind of fading a little bit. I want to wrap this up kind of soon. So what I'm looking for is sort of because I certainly believe in their broad hypothesis, which is that you make some new roads, it makes more sprawl, that makes obligation for yet still more roads. But like when they say it as like no relief and nothing happens, Oh, did I close the... I wanted the fourth plan I wanted to talk about. Like, where was that information? So car driver shares percentage-wise went up. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, is like... Because I see it went up 35%. What was the percentage of how much more road? Here we go. See, and then it's this kind of... We don't have data for congestion before the new road, but interviewees say it's severe. They say that in the first period it was substantially reduced almost down to zero before it slowly returned. And then people use the word equilibrium to say it's going to return to the same level it was before. But do we actually know that? That's the kind of just so sorry stuff you really got to be skeptical of. And again, I say all this, I don't drive a car. I ride a bicycle. I don't like urban sprawl. I want everything to be bike lanes. Like, I agree with the heart of this argument that I want less urban sprawl and I want less roads with cars on them and I want more trails. But, like... But I wonder how much I actually believe the... The average speeds were about the same or lower in rush hour in 2013 compared with 2003. The average speed in afternoon rush hours increased. The relieved road was reorganized with public transport. I'm sorry. I really hope I'm not understanding this article. I really hope so. Because if I'm understanding this article, then what it's saying is that when you make a new road, it doesn't actually make traffic go faster if the road legally makes you go slower than the old road. I really hope that's not what it's saying, but I think that might be what it's saying. I think the interesting Norwegian researchers determined that when you make a new road and so you gotta go slower, it doesn't make people go faster. Oh shit, Norway! For real? For real? Okay. I'm gonna bookmark this to give it another shot, maybe later. Or not. I don't know. Just I'm doing it, But what I really want to stress is notice how I didn't know anything about this paper, nor did I know anything about this paper, but I can still read a new field and look for these credibility markers in one direction or the other and still come to a conclusion. So that is a big thing I wanted to show in this video, and hopefully I did. And the last thing I want to make the point is because I was saying that, you know, it looked like this and this are kind of far apart, or I guess this and this is even the better. But here we can see, so it looks like what traffic engineers understand is how to keep flow more, how to reduce perturbations, which is having a breakdown lane, let disabled cars go down, to add lanes for merges to occur, you know, smooth the flow of vehicles with ramp metering, and that's one thing, but then the separately of, given the inevitability of perturbations, how do you control perturbations? So it looks like traffic engineers understand how to reduce the amount and amplitude of traffic perturbations. Nobody really understands how to lower the propagation rate of a fixed perturbation, except maybe Horn, Wang et al. Are the closest so far, and that their bilateral control methods will indeed lower the propagation of a perturbation and have it sort of ground out faster. And that traffic engineers as a discipline aren't people you'd expect to just know the answer to the flow question, but you would probably expect them to know this sort of thing, like what's on fourthplan.org. So I should clarify when I say that traffic engineers aren't doing traffic, because that's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, right? But that's the division that I'm seeing, that if I want to know how do I reduce a perturbation, I read stuff like this, that if I went and talked to Crandon, I would probably hear all this sort of stuff. And maybe this is sort of the common knowledge. So yeah, reducing roads, yeah. And that there is this sort of just so storyism that actually adding roads increases traffic that we should be a little skeptical of. Maybe roads help, but you can also just make smarter road and not more road. And that's probably a good idea. And I did save this one too, right? No. Let's keep those two. But in terms of, well, once you've got the perturbation, how does it percolate? More of a mathematical modeling question. People don't know. But it does sure seem like bilateral control is a good way to stop those propagations by letting the forward dilatory wave eat up some of your potential so that the following compressive wave has to do less work. That is my sort of put a bow on it understanding of this new field of traffic engineering after not quite 3 hours of study. And so if I wanted to say, how do I as an individual control traffic, I would say, well, I'm not convinced you can do too much as an individual because you don't see the impact of your own stuff anyway. But why don't you try going halfway between, if it's not a big deal, some amount that maybe in one of those papers I couldn't read, Horn and Wang get to how many people need to do this before it's going to actually start to help. How do I want to do in my city? I think this was high up for a reason. This probably is, all pretty sensible. You kind of read it and it sort of is self-justifying that it would help. Be skeptical about being sure that adding more roads would help, but I would also be skeptical about the story that urban road capacity expansion makes traffic, uniformly worse. And people probably don't call them jamatons, but that's not a bad word for if you don't want to say the phantom traffic wave every time you say the jamaton. But crucially, the jamaton is the backwards wave that comes from car following models. It doesn't look like there's a cute name for the forward dilatory wave because we're not really trying to reduce that You know what? Fuck it. I have just winged it every time.
Dilatory.
Dilatory. Wow, I was way off.
Dilatory.
The forward dilatory wave. This is the thing. Another willingness to look stupid benefit. I have read a lot. There are so many words I have read and never spoken. And I would look smarter if I never used them, but I would also be massively constraining the concept space I can access. Could I stop every time there's a new word and learn the pronunciation? Yeah, I suppose. But if I was anxiously monitoring myself about pronunciations, that is less brain power that I'm spending on learning the fucking thing. So, the dilatory wave. Nobody really names that because it's not really that bad. The forward dilatory wave is just people not accelerating quite as much as they could be accelerating. And it goes so fast that it doesn't stick around very long. So it's not the bad guy, but allowing it to go forward, propagating, means less jamaton compressive wave going backward. And we don't actually know if any of this generalizes to straight roads, because it does sure seem like all the examples are in circles because they're easy. But, of course, that creates this massive problem where... and let me pull up the video quick, because that will let me make my point a lot better.
Traffic jams and how to get rid of them.
Oh, this one has got a narrator.
We start with 20
watch
Gizmo
this.
Garden cars on a closed track implementing a car-following strategy. Each car measures the distance to the car ahead and adjusts its speed accordingly. Such a control strategy is called car following, and it's what human drivers as well as adaptive cruise controls systems do. Notice how cars start to bunch up in some areas, such as on the top left and on the right, while they thin out in other areas. After a while, areas of high density coalesce into so-called phantom traffic jams. They are called phantom traffic jams because there's no external cause such as an obstruction or distraction. These traffic jams, in fact, are not anyone's fault. Every driver is doing what makes sense based on the information available about the vehicle ahead. Instead, an emergent property of a string of coupled dynamic systems implementing a car-following strategy. Because of the stop-and-go nature of traffic under these circumstances, the average speed is lower than it could be if there were no traffic flow instabilities. Now we switch to bilateral control. The momentary drop in room light level is a signal for the cars to change their behavior. The blue LED indicates they are now in bilateral control mode. Bilateral control differs from car following in that it counterintuitively takes into account information about the car behind, not just information about the car ahead. As you'll see, the traffic flow immediately starts to smooth out. The dynamic system is working towards an equilibrium state where the cars are equally spaced and traveling at the same speed. Since now there are no cars stuck in a jam, the average speed is higher and the time to complete the circuit lower. Again, the momentary drop of room light was used to signal a change of state to the cars. The yellow LED now indicates they are back in car following mode. Note that this time the initial state was almost ideal with cars equispaced and moving at the same speed. So bunching up of cars can't be caused by initial conditions. Despite this, density fluctuations soon appear, and these eventually will turn into full-blown traffic jams. Once they appear, you will notice that the traffic jam moves upstream, that is, in a direction opposite to that in which the cars are moving. In fact, we can calculate the speed at which they move upstream based on the density of cars, the length of the cars, speed limit, and the control system parameters. One more time, back to bilateral control. Once again, the traffic flows smoothly and approaches an equilibrium state. The advantage of bilateral control are obvious. Note that this does not require full-fledged self-driving cars. Bilateral control is no more complex to implement than adaptive cruise control. The only difference is that adaptive cruise control is based on the state of the vehicle ahead, while bilateral control depends also on the state of the vehicle behind. Thus, distance and velocity sensors used in adaptive control to measure the state of the vehicle ahead need to be duped.
So I sure hope that audio came through. I just had this horrifying thought that if my browser's audio doesn't come through, it says exactly the same as the first video, but I'm just sitting silently the whole time because the guy was stuck. But yeah. So I think the thing we're missing, and his verbal explanation didn't point it out, is that you end up reaping what you sow eventually on this circular track, right? So what does this actually do in a straight line versus a circle? Because it is not clear to me at all. When you say that you should pay counterintuitive attention to the following car because it will fix the jam. Yeah, maybe, but that information is coming back to you because eventually, what happens to that car? The car that's one behind you is the progenitor for the car 20 in front of you. What if there's no progenitor relationship and the car behind you is never in front of the car in front of you? Which is, of course, what happens for all the driving we actually do and does this still. So those would be my questions reading the field is, does this actually generalize off the circular case? Because it's not clear that it does. And very relatedly, what are those studies? Because presumably also those efficacy studies that only a small percentage of drivers need to do it for it to work, was that circular or was that straight? It could be that Horn and Wang have a finding that answers both my objections at once. And so reading a new field, my next step would be somehow, someway, going and getting around to reading all these and trying to find one that talks about, those two big questions. And in the meantime, I wouldn't expect a traffic engineer to necessarily have the answers to these questions. It seems very niche. I expect traffic engineers to be able to tell me stuff like this. Yeah, and there isn't really a fun conclusion, but I hope that showed some of my strategies. I think that there was a couple of stuff I was really happy with in terms of getting into something new and talking about like these contextual clues for why I'm willing to trust it more than other stuff. And I really liked that I was so wrong at first about this paper, and then I saw the video and I saw the PopSci article and I adjusted. And I think that's a great example of how, had I been really fussy about getting it right the first time, you know what I mean, I would still be here reading. And by just being wrong the first time and talking out my wrongness and seeing that I couldn't explain something, I got to here much faster. And I think that here is more accurate where I'm sitting now. Unfortunately, I don't know if I can find a good source. I was hoping that there would be like a more dedicated traffic engineering subreddit that I could kind of take my final findings and like get people in the field to, sign off on how well or poorly I did. I'm not sure if I'm going to get that kind of follow-up. I think that might be a little too... Like, civil engineering might not be the right spot to just say, how did I get my understanding of traffic correct? So we'll see if there's any follow-up like that, but even if there isn't, hopefully on its own, the video still had stuff, that kind of got my points across, even if I can't sort of score it. Because in a very real sense, you can never formally score your reading of the new field, because sort of getting your mechanisms of what score should even mean is the work, right? So if it's something that I could like get a score out of 100 of how well I did, then it isn't a new field reading in the sense that I'm talking about it here, right? It's a quiz. It's a completely different knowledge landscape, but I don't know. This was a fun little experiment. I don't regret the time I did doing it. If you watched it, I hope you did not regret the time spent watching it.